But even after death, Freud's ideas continued to gain momentum.
One of the impetuses that Freud gave to the 20th century was giving people permission to be different from other people, to recognize that there is very little that is abnormal because the abnormal is so normal. And perhaps most important of all, really making it possible to talk about sex. That really, I think, helped hugely. In the century after Freud's time, homosexuality, sexual variety, much more sympathetic understandings about things that just used to be thought of as perverse. That was a big, big change in our sensibility, certainly of the Western world anyway, and something for which we should thank him.
There is an issue though, isn't there? Because some of his ideas, I mean, it's not just pop science, it's positively bad science.
It may even not be science at all, really, because the empirical basis for Freud's work is incredibly slender. I mean, he self-analysed, he analysed his wife and daughter, and a few neurotic Viennese ladies, and this is a very poor starting point for any real theory.
He looked a lot at the unconscious. How far does that stand up against what we now know from science, from neuroscience, for example?
Well, of course, neuroscience is making enormous strides now that there are instruments like the MRI scanner, the magnetic resonance imaging scanner, and we've learned quite a lot. One thing we've learned is that most mental computation takes place in a non-conscious way, below the level of consciousness, and so memory is stored, physically stored in the brain, and this must mean that many of the layers of as it were, psychic deposits of all our lives are in there and could be recovered. And so it is not a million miles away from what Freud was groping for.
He had the kind of strength to imagine what we're now understanding to be true.
That's exactly right. He was an imaginative genius, a wonderful storyteller. And, you know, even if you do a destructive job, which is you tear down a conventional fabric of ideas, that gives us an opportunity to see things differently. And I think he had enough wonderful insight to have struck the bell just very occasionally in ways that make us think this is an interesting aspect, an interesting perspective on human experience.
While theories like the Oedipus complex and death drive have been widely questioned, there's no doubting Freud's huge cultural influence.
His ideas have become so embedded, they're buried so deep within our day-to-day experiences that we take them for granted. So when advertisers scrutinise consumers to create brands that appeal to our irrational desires, they are drawing on Freud's psychoanalytical techniques.
It's one of the reasons that products are packaged in ways that promise youthful freedom, prestige, and of course, sex appeal. And Freud's influence is also there in how we make sense of who we are. The importance that we place on childhood experiences. Our openness to talk about the emotional complexity of our lives.
Some people even see his focus on looking inwards as promoting our narcissistic, individualistic culture, making us self-absorbed, self-obsessed.